Welcome to Humanizing Leadership. I'm your host, Louise H. Reed. Each week I sit down for 40 minutes and have a brilliant conversation with an expert guest where we discuss topics for next-gen leaders. On today's episode, I'm joined by Hailey Hecthman, Executive Director at Causeway Work Center. She's known as a creative, intentional, and purpose-driven social impact leader with a passion for co-creative team development, strength-based program implementation, and collective impact, which no doubt you will hear about today. I'm honored to have Hailey on the show today, entitled Authentic Experiences at Work, where we talk about what authenticity means, why authentic experiences matter, and how to be an authentic leader. Listen in, enjoy the show, and make sure you subscribe to my email list at louisehreed.com to get the show notes and quotes sent directly into your inbox. Without further ado, here is Hailey. Hailey, my new friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm thrilled to be spending this hour, I wish it could be an hour, this time with you, and focusing on, or at least starting in the idea of how to create authentic experiences as it relates to, actually, period. How to create authentic experiences. Maybe we could start by you sharing what authenticity or what authentic experiences, that actually means. When you say that, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, I think that could mean different things to different people. But for me, authentic experience or just showing up authentically really means having the ability and the comfort and the space to just be yourself and not have to put on a mask or an air or try to demonstrate that you're more knowledgeable in an area than you are or more confident in a certain area than you are. I think it means really feeling like you can be yourself and show up in a way that's honest and that leaves room for you to grow and develop and become a more full person and a more full version of yourself while also honoring all of these things that you already have in place. So that's what it means to me.
I love that. You have that written down somewhere like that?
No.
Well, now that this is recorded, that was beautiful. It's like we could stop the show now. How wonderful would it be if we had more of us, or all of us, but more of us being able to show up that way in all parts of our lives, and certainly as it relates to the show and humanizing leadership. How valuable would that be if we had leaders showing up that way who created workplaces?
That would be ideal.
Right? And I think we can get there. That is my North Star. Maybe I should say that. That is my North Star.
Absolutely.
And certainly what drew me to you and the kind of work that you do and the kind of human and leader that you are. Despite not having spent a lot of time together, I can tell by your stories and your background that this is who you show up as and aspire to be, an example of. And so I'm kind of alluding to this, that yes, authentic experiences matter. Maybe you could tell me a little bit more as to why. Why do we want to drop our masks and be more of our authentic selves? Maybe if we talk about the context of work or leadership, talk to me a little bit about that, the importance or the value of it.
Yeah. Well, I would say, there's so much value in showing up as yourself. First of all, it takes a lot of energy to show up as somebody else. And so I think the more that we spend time focused on what we feel like we're supposed to present as or who we're supposed to show up as, whether it's in work or in life, it really drains us of our ability to be fully present, because you're always then second guessing what you're saying or trying to ensure that the message is delivered in a really specific way. And so I think it takes away from other experiences and from being able to create real meaningful connection. I think when it comes to authenticity in leadership, I think really we have an obligation as leaders to model what that looks like. And so if you're hoping that, if you work, for example, I work in the social sector. And so if you're hoping that your team and the people that are working, on the ground with the people that you're supporting within your organization. You're hoping that they create real rapport with the people that they're interacting with, and that they show up in a way that's compassionate and helpful and really hears and listens to the stories of other people. Then you need to be that person as well, in a leadership role of feeling comfortable expressing who you are and sharing pieces of yourself, feeling confident sharing when you don't know something and being honest about it, because you want people to also feel that they have the space to grow and develop, and that it's okay not to know something if you're making the efforts to figure it out and ask questions and grow from that experience. So I think it's so important, especially in leadership, to feel even more okay coming across as a human, because that trickles down throughout an entire organization of other people feeling like they can speak their truth and feeling like they can ask questions and not know the answers or make mistakes and try something else, because they see that modeled from you.
So much value in what you just shared there. And you were talking about being a model for what authenticity looks like. I think it's really easy for leaders, and you didn't say this, but through my experience, I sort of took it this way, leaders to sort of be pointing the finger saying, okay, you do this. This is how I expect you to behave. But sort of to your point, if you as the leader aren't that yourself, like maybe we need to be pointing the fingers back or holding the mirror up to ourselves. And are we being who we're asking our people to be with their clients, with the people they serve? Because we as leaders serve our people. Those who are on our team, we serve them as they themselves serve others. And so I think it sounds so simple. And the reason I'm sort of bringing this up again and highlighting it as a statement that you made is because I'd like to encourage listeners to hold that mirror up. Because I think that's something we don't do enough of. It's easy to correct others than to recognize our own strengths and shortcomings. So maybe you could talk to me a little bit about this as it relates authenticity and being an authentic leader. How did you come to sort of explore that in yourself?
Well, I'd say it was a journey of growth and self-discovery. I think I really started my experience, not necessarily in leadership, but well before that, early into my life, early into my adulthood as well, coming from that place of being someone who is so focused on what other people thought and wanting to be someone who was always there for everyone and really be that support system, which is great. And I definitely always will carry a piece of that with me in the work that I do. But there came this point where the focus on what was good for those around me became so much more important than what I needed and how I needed to really get to know myself in order to grow into that person that I wanted to be. And so I went through my own personal journey there. There was a lot of trial and error and review of patterns and thoughts and limiting beliefs that I had about myself for a long time. And going through that, I think I was really able to discover where my strengths lie, but also where I had some areas of growth, and just being able to identify those and work towards those, and not with shame or, with regret for where I was at that point, but really just with an eye of curiosity of how I could get better and how I could grow. And, recognizing that if I wasn't willing to do that for myself, how could I be in a position to provide feedback to other people on how they should grow and change if I wasn't able to do that on my own? And so that was something I really took seriously and still do. And I'm not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect, but I'm always trying to identify, where are my blocks, where are my barriers, where can I improve, what can I learn from in a situation, who can I learn from in the context and environment that I'm in, and what can that bring to both myself and the people around me.
So much of what you share, it resonates with me. One of the things you mentioned is a journey of self-discovery. And I recall reading, and I've mentioned Michelle Obama's book Becoming a number of times on my show, but and so I find it fascinating how much it continues to come up. And she said in the book, we're always in the process of becoming. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really beautiful, and also almost gives permission or sets the expectation that you never arrive. You just continue to become more of who you are, more of who you want to be, more of who you aspire to be. I thought that was really nice.
It's beautiful.
And I thought, again, it created a bit of, space, and it dropped, for me, as I read it, immediately dropped some of the amount of pressure that I was putting on myself to be that person already. And you also commented on something that I thought was really interesting. You referred to an eye of curiosity. And talk to me a little bit more about why curiosity has been important in your leadership, not just necessarily in your own personal and professional development, but I think we lose a lot of our curiosity as we become more in this, become more rigid. We join organizations in this greater rigidity around who we are, how we show up, and how we behave. So talk to me a little bit about how curiosity can help.
Well, I think curiosity in my mind equals openness. Yeah. That, if you're not curious and you're not necessarily open to new ideas and new experiences and new ways of seeing the world and seeing a problem, and particularly within organizations, like you said, you can get rigid in what the focus is and what you're doing and how services work and all of those pieces. However, if you don't maintain that eye of curiosity, you lose out on being able to improve and adapt and evolve to the needs of the context and the people that are around you. And so for me, it's so important even just to be curious and open to the potential in other people. Of sometimes, the people around you, they see their strengths in a certain way, but you can identify strengths in them that they don't necessarily see in themselves. But you need to take the time to really get to know them and recognize what you identify as these kind of untapped areas of potential, and really be able to work with them on bringing that to life. Because it's like you said, it's not always easy to put a mirror to yourself. And sometimes you need someone else to identify things that you don't see within you, or within a situation, or within a problem that you're trying to work through. And so I think that eye of curiosity and that openness really leaves you in a position where you can find solutions that otherwise wouldn't come to you if you didn't look beyond your current understanding of the situation or of the world that you're in at that moment.
One of the reasons why I love podcasts so much, especially with people who are sharing how you're sharing, is it makes so much sense. Now, what you're saying is like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. But in the busyness of our days, we don't often pause to reflect on the simple things that really could expand our mind, our eyes, our opportunities. And so that's super. I also thought when you were sharing that openness allows us to see the humanity in others. And one of the things that I know you are very experienced in, work in this space, is around, with invisible disabilities, or perhaps disabilities just more generally, those with disabilities. I've got a specific question around that. And how do we as leaders, with this idea of openness, best support invisible disabilities, as leaders in the workplace?
Well, I would say, don't make assumptions about what people are capable of is the biggest piece. That, in order for us to support people where they're at, we need to ask questions and hear from people what it is they need, what's going to support them, what's going to make the difference, rather than us assuming that it's going to be this solution or that solution, or that this kind of role or that kind of role is going to be a good fit. Really getting to know people and asking them about, their hopes, their dreams, their needs, their challenges, and what is going to be the best way of addressing them. for a lot of the people throughout my career that I worked with in the disability space, some of them, I worked for quite a while in working with people with neurodevelopmental disabilities, and so many of the questions that we asked them when it came to their hopes and dreams for the future, so many people said they hadn't really thought about it because no one had really asked them before. And I'd always thought, how sad is that there are people in our community who have such talents and strengths and abilities and a completely unique way of seeing the world, because everyone has a unique way of seeing the world, and they haven't really been able to share those ideas or those experiences because a lot of the choices for their life have been made on their behalf, and a lot of the experiences or situations that are available to them have been made available to them based on our assumptions of what was the right fit. And so one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give people is never assume you know the answer to someone else's life, that you really need to take the time to get to know people and help them to identify their potential and their skills and their experiences that will make a difference both in the workplace and in our community. Because the more we know about real experiences of the people around us, the more we can create space for those to be utilized in a way that's going to benefit us all. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
I love that. I have a child who has a variety of significant learning differences, we call them. But it has definitely set him up, or he's been living his life in a very different way as a result of those differences that have been extremely difficult. This is not news to you. But what it does mean, again, this won't be news to you either, but what this does mean is he's had to learn to navigate things in a really creative way, very different than those who are what do we start? I forget the term now. What's the term we're supposed to use? Typical. Thank you. And the value that brings to an organization is significant. How do we start to move the needle between people recognizing this and saying, oh, yes, leaders listening right now saying, oh, yes, I agree. I understand. And I see the value in that. How do we bridge the gap between that? Because I've experienced it working with a lot of leaders who believe that to be true. Mm-hmm. And then when we look at our workplaces, I'm not sure how represented these individuals are. Mm-hmm. What can we start to do? Because I know it's not an easy solution here. Otherwise, we'd have fixed it. I wouldn't be asking the question if it was a challenge. I guess A, do you see that challenge? And B, what can we start to do? What are some simple things that start to move us in the right direction towards greater inclusion in this regard?
Well, I agree that there are now, a lot of leaders that are starting to look in that direction and are starting to see the value in bringing different perspectives and ideas and experiences into their workplaces, because it really builds on the possibilities for an organization. We need to hear from different points of view in order to come up with unique and innovative solutions. So I think we're starting to move definitely in that direction. Some of the easier to implement starting off pieces that we can put in place is really looking at the positions within organizations and making sure that if we're going through a recruitment process, as an example, that it's written in a way that is accessible, that we're looking for a variety of different things when it comes to the people that we're looking to bring into a position. So we're looking at traits, we're looking at experiences, we're looking at values. We're not just looking at, a checkbox of just this, and this, really being open to how different types of people's perspectives could fit well with the work that it is that you're intending to do. And then once you are bringing people into that space, ensuring that your processes for going about that process are also accessible. So looking at your interview process and making sure the questions are clear and in plain language, and looking at, different situations that someone may find themselves in, giving people the opportunity to see questions in advance to prepare, because not everyone works well on the spot, or some people need to be able to take notes or ask questions in order for them to really process the information that's in front of them. And same thing with bringing people on board, your training and your onboarding process, making sure that those are clear, and that they're also learning about your organization and the tasks within those jobs from a perspective of different learning styles, that different people learn in different ways. And so being open to exploring how to offer training in different formats that are going to work for the people that you're bringing on. And hearing from your team, talking to your whole team about what gaps they see in terms of strengths and ideas and perspectives, so that you're taking that into consideration as you move forward and find people to bring into that conversation. Because really it's about building on what are we missing, who are we missing, whose representation and ideas and perspectives do we need in order for us to have a really holistic view about how we move forward in the best way possible.
The insights and suggestions and questions that you're sharing are phenomenal. Having worked in this space as well in a different capacity, I truly know the impact of using those questions to guide decisions. Mm-hmm. So listeners, make sure you do get the show notes for this. Louise at louisehreed.com. Get on the mailing list and you get all these questions. All these questions will be captured from Hailey's conversation, because you're just, these are such valuable takeaways. There are a couple of questions I wanted to ask in follow up to that. One of them, is around this concept of hiring overqualified people for roles. It's something that I have certainly seen in my 20 plus years experience in HR. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are and how we can look at this. So the overqualified, when I think that there could be another person who would be more fulfilled in that role, that absolutely is qualified, and the value that they could bring to this might not be the typical person that one would think is an ideal candidate for the role, which is where we put our blinders on when we're writing the job descriptions, right? Mm-hmm. So talk to me a little bit about this concept of overqualification, how we look at our lens, or how the lens in which we might be able to look through the job description and the traits and the values. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, with this idea of overqualification, that, we only need people who have certain credentials or certain experience or certain education, you're really limiting yourself in terms of the variety of insights and perspectives that you can have within any given role. I think it's really important to look at strengths over job descriptions of what kind of strengths are you hoping to bring onto your team? What potential are you hoping for people to realize? There's a lot of different ways of having work done. And it depends on the role. Obviously, there are certain roles that have really specific criteria that, however, if you have the openness to work with your team and identifying what purpose are we trying to accomplish as a team, and what kind of skills and experience do we need in order to really fulfill that, I think that's going to be so much more of an indicator than just here is a job description with tasks, and these are the kinds of people we assume can complete these tasks, because that isn't necessarily the case. And you may have people who are on your team who have all of those qualifications, but don't necessarily have an interest in everything that's within their job description. So it's also about how do we ensure that the people that we're working with are engaged in what they're doing and take meaning and take interest in it, because you can have someone who has a job description that's really clear, yet they take twice as long as someone else on your team to do something that who may have a ton of interest in that area and is really motivated to grow and evolve their skills in that particular area. And so they may be a better fit for completing that task than the person that you assume is qualified based on their resume. And so I think you just need to be open to having conversations with your team. I think the same thing goes for yourself, that, it's really easy as a leader to go day to day on autopilot and not really be intentional in how you show up. And so it's important to be reflective on what you're bringing to the table as well, and making sure that if there are areas within your job description that you could provide some additional responsibility or ability to someone on your team who is really excited about the potential of growing in that area, that you can do that as well, and that you can work with them and coach them on it. So I don't think there's anything in our space that can't be navigated from having conversations with people about what their intentions are, what motivates them, and where can they learn. Because the other piece too, if you have someone who is missing one area of expertise or content knowledge, that's something that we can strive to connect them with training or learning opportunities or professional development on, even if it's just having them sit down with someone on the team who has that experience and learning from them and getting, an informational interview going there too. I think there's lots of ways to enhance people's content knowledge when it comes to the different roles that they may be in.
So much can be solved, I think, through authentic relationships, openness, and curiosity. Mm-hmm. And those are themes that I feel like we're continuing to see evidence of in what it is that you're sharing. And this is no different. This is very specific now. So I know you work for one of these organizations in particular, but talk to me about where people could go, examples of organizations or tools perhaps, where, yes, I'm a leader. Yes, I want to do more of this. Are there tools or organizations, or where can I go to get better at this?
Well, I would say, in terms of resources, I think one of the biggest misassumptions that leaders make is that they have to do everything on their own. So reaching out to organizations that have expertise in this area, or who can help you connect with people who are looking for work, and or connect with resources that are going to support you in making your workplace more inclusive. I know there's lots of great organizations. There's a Diversity Institute does a lot of amazing work in this area. The Mental Health Commission has a mental health in the workplace standard that provides a lot of useful tools. And then, of course, connecting with organizations like ours at Causeway, which really focus on creating that meaningful fit between the employer and the employee. So, we work on our end with people who are looking for work, but we also work with employers that are looking to connect with people. And we support navigating some of those conversations around where is the right fit, what are some supports that are needed in order to make a workplace more accessible for someone coming in? What conversations do we need a little bit more third-party assistance with, rather than navigating on our own? So don't be afraid to reach out for those supports. You don't have to figure out everything on your own. You don't have to, feel like you have all of these solutions and that you're just going to implement them and it's going to be great. It's okay to not know how to go about it, and to really do some research and reach out to organizations that are there with that purpose in mind. So I would always encourage organizations to seek supports locally, because there are lots of great organizations that can provide assistance along that journey.
And to those who wish to find those organizations, we've got this really great tool called Google. So use it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I feel quite passionate about, and to be honest, have been frustrated with, as I have navigated this space and really been an advocate for increasing diversity across all fronts, and then changing the way our workplaces behave to create inclusion, because we both know that those are two different things. That organizations say, oh yes, okay, we're on the diversity bandwagon. They won't say bandwagon, but really it's a bandwagon because engaging in these kinds of activities, reaching out to Causeway, working with the United Way, working with some other organizations, which are phenomenal. I've had experience with both and other organizations too, to your point about really walking employers through the whole process. And it takes more time. It takes more time, especially while it's kind of new, right? You don't just post it on your website and that's it. I know Causeway and United Way have made it as easy as possible. But it is an extra step. We need to be putting our money where our mouth is. And I think I'm saying this probably isn't even a question. I don't think it's going to be a question, on a bit of a soapbox, but I'm sort of pleading with those listening. If you are a leader in an organization where you're saying you value diversity and inclusion and equity and belonging and whatever you kind of have called it now, please put some resources towards it. Don't just say it, do it. I'm just wondering, and you don't have to have a comment on this. I'm just wondering what your observation has been around this, and if you've seen maybe some movement and some evolution as it relates to putting resources where we need to in order to make a difference and see a difference.
Yeah, I think we are starting to see that a lot more. I think a lot of organizations and businesses are prioritizing diversity, inclusion, and equity, and are looking at, corporate social responsibility and how do they support organizations that are doing this kind of work. I think that's starting to be a lot more of a focus. And I think that's also being driven by, we live in a consumer society, and consumers are also expecting that a lot more now than they have in the past, of wanting to see organizations that are creating social impact, wanting to support businesses that are providing funds to organizations that are doing work in their community. So I think it's starting to move in that direction. I think of a lot of it too is, it's not just about doing the work in terms of reaching out and creating opportunities. It's also doing the work internally as a leader and making sure that, you are identifying for yourself your own unconscious biases and how you think, and rethinking how you think, and learning and educating yourself so that, that you're bringing people onto your team in a way that's welcoming and where they feel heard and seen and supported. Because I know, a lot of the people that we work with at Causeway, they've been really underestimated, or they've experienced stigma, or they've been misinterpreted. And so, a big focus for us is being able to support people in seeing and reaching their potential. And we need to believe in people's potential and help them to see that in order for them to be in a position to thrive within the community. So I think it's taking the time to really get to know people and have them share their stories and their hopes and their dreams, and really dig deeper into their experiences and ask them questions and listen intently and intentionally to the people that we're working with. I think if we could all just listen to people and hear them for what they're saying and really delve into their experiences as context expertise in the spaces that they've been in and the ways that they've lived their life, I think we'd all be the better, and we'd have a much more inclusive community because we'd see each other so much more humanly.
Yeah. So I'll add listening to that list. I've heard a lot of discussion around authentic relationships, openness, curiosity, and when you ask those, when you are curious, to actually listen, right? To actually listen for understanding, not listen for space so you can speak. One of the things that comes to mind is something that I reflected on a lot when I was writing my book, Humanizing Leadership, is that management is about projects and process, and leadership is about people. That is the job. You may have aspects of your job as a leader that is management specific, related more to that management field, but leadership is about people. So if you're not interested in people, leadership's probably not your space,
No.
Leadership's probably not your space. And I'm shocked at the number of people who this is kind of a novel sort of concept or distinction. So wondering what your experience has been and your journey and through that sort of evolution from management and leadership has been, both from your experiences as well as what you've observed from others.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, for me, I'm very fortunate to be working in a sector that is a lot more focused on people. I've always really appreciated that about working within the social sector, within the nonprofit space, that I've often interacted with organizations that are really prioritizing the people, both that they work with within their organization and the people that they're serving in the community. So it is a really great space for that. And in my work specifically, that's always something that has driven me personally. I obviously am committed to supporting good process and to being transparent and creating strategic direction that is in line with where we want to go. But the first and foremost priority is really making sure that that journey is co-created with the people that we work with, because ultimately you don't get there unless the people within the organization are on the same page as you and you're all on the same roadmap to success, because people need to buy into the future that you're creating together. It's like as if someone creates a goal for you, you're a lot less motivated to achieve that goal because you didn't have any say, you weren't a part of its development, your perspective wasn't taken into consideration, your ideas weren't really heard, and maybe you don't believe it because it doesn't have any personal reflection of you in that goal. And so I've always believed that our goals as an organization should be shaped within the people that we have working in our spaces, because that's the way that they're going to be achieved, because everyone has that personal investment in seeing it happen because they were a part of its creation. And so I have a lot of experience working for some grassroots organizations as well as developing programs from their inception with volunteers. And those have been some of the most amazing experiences that I've had, because everyone was really involved in the best shaping into a reality because they were a part of it from the beginning. And so, yeah, I think it's so important to honor the people that you work with as experts on the context of the environment that you're in. I've never come into an organization expecting that I have all of the solutions and all of the information and this is how it's going to go. I always take the time to get to know the people in the space, because they're the ones ultimately who is going to be involved in bringing our success to reality.
What a great way just to bring this to almost to a close. You said co-create with the people you work with. Talk about creating authentic experiences. Not only have you shared a lot of really great insights and questions to consider and steps to take, but that was a really interesting concept and so valuable. I often think if you have to get buy-in, you've lost already. So this concept of co-creating often takes a bit longer, but has better results. And I can't recall the data and the research offhand, but there is data and research behind that supports that. So not only does it feel right when you say it, there is also research to support, to strengthen that support. If there was one thing, as we look to wrap up the show now, if there was one thing that maybe you've not shared about how to create authentic experiences, or a major takeaway that you'd like listeners to take from the show, what would that be?
I would say, going back to that idea of modeling, I think take the time to really dive into yourself and what brings life to you. To take stock of the areas that you really thrive in and that give you confidence and that make you feel like you're doing what you're meant to be doing. And I don't think we spend enough time doing that. I think we don't question ourselves often enough. We just will spend a lot of time on autopilot, going through our checklist and saying, this is my to-do list for the day, rather than really intentionally reflecting on how we're showing up for our team and taking breaks and asking for input from other people on our perspectives if we're getting stuck or if we're feeling clouded. And so I think if you want to create an environment where people feel confident showing up as themselves, you really need to show that you're self-reflective and that you're taking the time to get to know where your strengths and where your pitfalls are, and seeking support for yourself as well, so that you model that when you're at a loss or you're feeling overwhelmed or that you're struggling, that reaching out for support is something that's actually strong and courageous to do, rather than something that should be seen as, not as strong or shown as a weakness of some kind. And so if you want your team to reach out for support, and you want your team to be driven by purpose, and you want your team to be showing up authentically, you need to do that yourself.
I love that. Leadership really is an inside job. It starts as an inside job, and you shared that beautifully. Hailey, thank you so much for your time, sharing it with us and sharing all of your great insights and tips and strategies. I really appreciate it, Hailey.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
I'm glad. Thanks. You've been listening to Humanizing Leadership with Louise H. Reed, along with today's guest, Hailey Hecthman. Thanks so much to you for tuning in. If you want to help get the word out on how we humanize leadership, please rate the podcast, leave a review, and tell your friends that they can subscribe to Humanizing Leadership on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or Stitcher. And if you like what you heard today, which I know you did, you have to sign up for a free weekly newsletter where you'll get inspiration and information on how to level up in your own leadership. You can sign up for that at louisehreed.com. Otherwise, I always love to hear from you. You can email me at louise@louisehreed.com or connect with me on LinkedIn. Finally, podcast theme music is from Bensound, so thank you to them. Also, great gratitude to Contact Talk Radio Network and my podcast production team, Cameron Steele and Jay Andrews. Thanks again to you, my friends, and I will chat again with you next Tuesday.